Hi everyone, I am Harshvardhan, an artificial intelligence engineer, and you are watching another WebGuy YouTube channel. Today we are going to learn about functions in Python. So, let's get started. And if you have not yet subscribed, hit the subscribe button and also hit the notification bell icon so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. So at first, what is a function? A function is just a block of code which will run only when it is called. You can pass any data to the function and it will return you some data as a result. But now you might be thinking, okay, everyone is talking about functions. Why we are going to use function? And when we are going to use function? So, functions are mainly used for reusability and maintainability of the code. That means by use of functions, you will improve the reusability and the maintainability of the code. For example, let's say you have a block of code and that block of code is to be executed again and again in your program. Then instead of writing those block of code again and again in your program, you can just specify that to a function and you will call the function again and again in your program. This is called improved reusability of the code. You have reused that block of code again and again in your program without writing that again and again. Now, since you have removed redundant code, your code becomes short and concise. So your code is now more maintainable. So that's how function improves the reusability and maintainability of code. In Python, to define a function, we will use def keyword, then function name. I will say function name. Instead of function name, you can write anything, ball, cat, aeroplane. This is just a function name. And then open and close parenthesis, give a colon, and then press enter. In Jupyter Notebook, you will always get an indented block. You can write your own block of code that have to be executed when the function is called. So I will say print function name is called. Okay, this is called function definition. Here our interpreter will check for any error, but it won't run this particular code. So to execute or run this code, we have to call the function. To call a function, you have to give function name and then open and close parenthesis and then run the cell. Now you can see that our function is now executed. That means the block of code present inside the function is executed. So this is called function definition. Function definition. And here you have called the function. Okay, remember I told you that you can pass any data to a function. This data is called argument or parameter. There is some technical difference between argument and parameter that I will discuss, but here we will call it a parameter. So at first we have to write a function. We will say def, then function name. Instead of function name, I will write say add. And then you have to give a parameter. So at first you will give open and close parenthesis, and inside that you have to specify a parameter. I will say value 1. And then inside the function, I will add that value 1 with 10. And I will print this value. Instead of doing this, I will just save it to a variable x and I will print x. We have defined a function add which will take a parameter value 1. Now we will call this function add. Now here you have to give the argument. That means the number you want to get added with this 10. So I will say 2. And you can see that we got an output of 12 because 10 plus 2 is 12. So now what is the difference between argument and parameter? This value 1 is called parameter. That means the variable specified at the function definition is called parameter. And this is called argument. The data you have passed at function call is called argument. You can pass any number of parameter to a function. For example, def, I will define a new function add, and I will say value 1, value 2, and then I will say x is equals to value 1 plus value 2, and then I will just print x. We have defined a function add which will take two parameters. That means it will take two data, and then it will add those two data, save it to a variable x, and then print the value which is present inside the variable x. So we will call this function add, and here we will give a value 10 and another is 2. Instead of 2 I will give another 10. That's 20. Remember that at first you have defined the add function here. This add function is now overwritten by this add function. So this data, this statements won't be executed. Now this statement will be executed. So you can also say add 3 and 2, you will get 5. But remember, by default, a function must be called with the correct number of argument. It means that here you have given two parameters, then at the function call you have to provide two arguments. For example, if I do this, we will get an error saying that we have missing one required positional argument, which is value 2. So our function expects there is two data which is coming as an argument. So if I do this, now there is no error. You cannot do this also, add 1, 2 and 3. Again you will get an error because it will say two positional arguments are required, but 3 were given. Here you have given 3, whereas in function definition we want only 2 arguments. You might have seen some website, like say you just log in and there is a pop-up, hi, and then username. So this kind of thing can be done using Python. So I will define a function and I will say greet, and I will get the name, or you can say username of the person, and I will just say print hello, and then I will just specify space and then username. I will say greet and I will give a name Harshvardhan. Great. So as I will log into the website, now the system will give me this pop-up, hello Harshvardhan. So this is one basic example where you can use a function in real life. You can also give an arbitrary number of argument to a function. Here it was required to give two values to a function, but let's say you don't know how many data or how many parameters are coming to your function. So you can use star, that means asterisk, then a variable name. So for example, I will say a function and function 1, or just a function, and I will give asterisk and then a name of a parameter which is really kids. So I will just say print the youngest child is, and then we will use list indexing. I will say 2, and now I will call this function. So I will say child 1, child 2, child 3, child 4. Now you can see that we got an output. The youngest child is child 3. Here this data is passed to the function in form of tuple. And we have used this indexing method to grab the data which was child 3. Instead of this kids, you can use anything. You can use copy, pen, aeroplane, anything. But for general convention, we use args for argument. For example, def function, and I will give args, okay, and then I will print the youngest child is, now I will say, okay, kids not, it's args, and I will give 1. I will just copy this and paste it here. Yes, the youngest child is child 2. Here, this args is a general convention that every programmer will know that we are going to provide here n number of parameters or any number of parameters. There is also called keyword argument. That means I will just define this function again, add function, and I will say add. Now value 2 is 10 and value 1 is 3. So here by default 1, 2, then this 1 will be associated for this value 1 and this 2 will be associated to this value 2. But here we have interchanged that by using keywords. This is a keyword for this value 10 and the value 1 is a keyword for 3. So you can use keyword argument to send argument in a key value syntax. We can also provide n number of arbitrary keyword argument. So for this we will use 2 times of asterisk. Here we have used single time asterisk. We can use 2 time asterisk for arbitrary number of keyword arguments. So for example, I will say def another function. We will say here also a kid, and then we will say print the last name of youngest child is. Now since we are providing a keyword argument, so we have to use a key. So it will be like this: kid last name. So first define this function and now call this function. I will say another function, and I will give some key value pair. First name as Shyam and last name as Bhagat. So the last name of the youngest child is Bhagat. Here we have used this as key here and grabbed this value to print this in the statement. We can also pass default parameter value. For example, I will just copy this function again and paste it here, and now I will define a default parameter value. I will say value 1 have default value of 10 and value 2 have default value of 7. Now let's call this function without any parameters or arguments. You can see that we got an output of 17 without any error, because we are saying Python, okay Python, go here and take these default values and calculate the function and calculate the output if there is no argument passed. But if we do like this, again we got output without any error, because again this data, this 7 is now considered as a default value, but this 10 is overwritten by 4. There is also a keyword called return keyword. To understand the return keyword, we will define a function. I will say again a function 1, and I will give a parameter x, and I will just return 5 multiplied by x. Data is equals to function 1. I will pass 5 here. Now let's check the value of data. It's 25. So let's understand what's happening here. At first we have passed 5 into the function, It will calculate 5 multiplied by 5, which is 25, and now it will return that data to save inside this variable data. So the data have 25. Since a function definition cannot be empty, but if for some reason you want your function to be empty, you can just write a pass statement. So for example, I will say df aeroplane, and I want my aeroplane to do nothing, so I will say pass, and now I will call the function aeroplane. Right. So that's all for this lecture. See you in the next one.